So this is the session is monitoring and evaluation for digital transformation, led by Code for Canada and Merlin Chatwin. He is monitoring and evaluation lead, and he's also a PhD candidate with an interdisciplinary background in political science, geography, education, and community organizing. Merlin's professional and academic pursuits focus on supporting inclusive civic participation and using evaluation to maximize social and strategic impact. So thank you so much, Merlin, for being here. And it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for spending your time with us from all over the world. You could be anywhere right now, and I appreciate you spending an hour and a half doing monitoring and evaluation. Not that I can think of many things that are more fun, but not everybody agrees with me, so appreciate it. Yeah, so we have a presentation. How, Sofía, are you sharing your screen, or should I be doing mine?
No, you can share yours. You're a co-host, so you can share your screen easily.
Okay, that is something that I should have practiced. 1 second.
Don't worry. Luckily, we haven't had any tech issues, so if it happens, like, wait, it's also okay.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Okay. Apologies for the minor fail there. Thank you for the clapping hands. I appreciate the support. All right, so welcome. I am from Code for Canada. For those of you who don't know, Code for Canada is a national nonprofit working with government, residents in the tech and design community. So when we talk about digital transformation, we're talking about how it encompasses enabling government to deliver better digital public services, to support communities to solve community challenges, and all using technology and design. So it's a very, I would say, broad and inclusive definition of digital transformation, yeah, both from government and community side. I think the way that I'm approaching this conversation is from, it's an invitation into a conversation. So we're all just kind of learning how to do proper or interesting and engaging online presentations. I don't know that I've mastered it yet. My preference is always in person, work through problems, but this one I really want to make it as interactive as you want and as you are willing. So I'll be presenting some information, and I'm happy to have questions as we go.
Also, just a quick comment. If you have any questions or so, you can also put them in the chat, and I'll keep track of them so we can answer them. Yeah.
So for the agenda, we'll do some introductions to me and to Code for Canada and to John. We'll have we're going over some learning objectives, going through the problem that we're trying to address, talking a bit about Code for Canada's approach, introducing contribution analysis, which is the framework that we're using, and then trying to apply some learning to a sample project, some light touch activities near the end. So, as Sofía said, my name is Merlin. I'm the Monitoring and Evaluation Manager for Code for Canada. I've been with Code for Canada for just over a year now, I guess almost a year and a half. I'm working on mostly internal, trying to figure out how to up the monitoring and evaluation game of Code for Canada, looking at the programs, but also doing a really broad sort of, I spent a lot of time doing a research paper on monitoring and evaluation in the civic tech ecosystem, and that'll be published later this year. really just trying to see what's there and what we could learn from and where the gaps are so that we can start the conversation and allow people to contribute some of their latent knowledge. One of the things that I've noticed, and we'll get to this a little bit later though, is that I'm in a very privileged position. There are not a lot of people who get to spend all of their time looking at monitoring and evaluation. And so I feel a little bit of pressure that since I have all that time, we need to produce something and support the entire Code for All ecosystem but civic tech in general. And then John just recently joined us, and I'll let John, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Merlin. Yeah, so John Griffin. I just recently started for Code for Canada, going on about 2 months, almost 2 months ago, as the monitoring and evaluation coordinator. I'm here to support Merlin in the role at Code for Canada. And similar, it's been really exciting in being able to get to focus on this and spend so much time looking at the different ways we can try to capture data and use it in the civic tech ecosystem. And yeah, and so I'm really excited to get to be part of this, and very, very excited that so many people have come by today. So thank you all.
And interesting note that John and I have history working together. We previously worked together doing local government taxation reform in Ghana. Spent, I guess that was probably close to 2 years that we were working together there. Yeah, and then when we moved back to Canada, he just couldn't resist. So, or I couldn't resist, one of the two. So, John, I'll let you take this one too. We're gonna do a quick getting to know each other introduction activity.
Right, so today we sort of, like we talked about, what's bringing everyone here today. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of different things. You might be working at a Code 4 somewhere else in the world, and you might just be interested in this space in general. But I know for us, we've talked about wanting to bring monitoring and evaluation into the civic tech space, and we want to know why this is important to you and what you're hoping to get out of this session today. One key thing that I think happens a lot in these, and is, as someone who works in ME, I encounter it all the time, is we also want to know one evaluation term you've heard before that you hope no one asks you to define. I think we've all been there. I know I certainly have. So this will just help us feel more comfortable, I think, and realize that not everyone has all the answers all the time. So
Sofía, is it possible for us to break into some smaller groups?
Yeah, sure. We're 24 in here, so I just would like to know how many people you would like for the groups.
Why don't can we do 6 groups of 4? Would that be possible?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, so while she's setting that up, what we're gonna do is go into our smaller groups. And I want you to have conversations amongst yourselves, and then if you can, when we're coming back, just copy and paste or write 2 things from the discussion into the chat so that we can hear and learn a little bit more as a large group. So we'll spend just say 6 minutes.
Okay, before we go, it's important to mention we're gonna have actually 5 groups of 4. And for all the participants, the getting in and getting out of the breakout rooms can be a bit overwhelming. Like, it's very woof. So just like a quick hint on that. It's everything is okay. Just like it's a bit woof, intense. Okay, so I'm gonna create the sessions. You're gonna see a small chat where it's gonna ask you to join a session. So you can all please join. think there's still two people haven't. Awesome. Okay, everyone is in the hall.
Sorry, I thought that was. I didn't realize it was a pain in the butt for Zoom.
No, it's not. It's just that it's a bit like especially when you are about to leave, like it sends you a message like you have like 20 seconds left, and then it takes you out of the room. It takes you out of the room like super abruptly.
Okay.
So it can be like very whoa. Yeah, it's more along that like everything is fine, and I love breakout rooms because it really allows you to interact with each other, especially if it's such a big group.
Yeah.
But it can be like, especially when it takes you out of the room to like go to the main waiting room or like the main room. It's like it's super abruptly. Okay, there's another person. I just need that person. Hi, Farah. We're working in a breakout rooms activity, so I'm gonna assign you to another room so you can go and participate there. You're gonna see a box, a dialogue text where it's gonna ask you to join the other session.
So, Sofía, the only other one we have is the slide that says introducing the Move project. So when they go into their small groups, will they have access to the whiteboard like we talked about?
I think they don't have access to the whiteboard. Only in the main room.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then we'll just get them to do the same thing. They can take some of their notes and then put them into the chat.
I can create quickly a document where we can put their like group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, and they can put their notes in there. Do you want me to do that?
Sure, that'd be great.
Awesome. Okay. Just give me 1 second. It's gonna be a super simple document. So.
Yeah, that's great. And then you can explain to them how to get to it when we get there.
Okay, do you want me? I'm gonna put again the questions for the breakout room so they'll see it too.
And do the rooms end automatically, or do they?
No, you have to leave me when you want them to be over. I mean, we can. How?
Let's bring them back. I haven't been counting the time, so.
Okay, could you just give me 1 minute so I can finish the
No
other
problem.
doc?
No problem.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's just change the. Okay, now I'm done. I'm gonna then, okay, so I'm gonna close the rooms and that's gonna give them like 1 minute to join back to the session.
Perfect. Perfect.
1 minute. Okay.
Welcome back. Are we? Should I give people another minute or?
No, they're just joining now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kicked you out of the room. Yeah. Yeah. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Sofía. Hi, everyone. Long time.
It's an authoritarian system.
Yeah, it's kind of abrupt it's so abrupt when it like kicks you out like whew.
Yeah.
Very undemocratic. Jeez.
I was midway through a sentence.
But John, you're always midway through a sentence, so that's no different.
Hi everyone. This is Akram from National Endowment for Democracy. I was just about to ask my question in the break room, but we were kicked out. I just wanted to have a follow-up question using this authoritarian system. As I'm pretty much sure that you have read some negative news about Zoom. So I'm just wondering, what's your rationale or reason to choose Zoom as your platform to conduct this session today?
Okay. If you want, I can go through that question. Do you mind if we go through it at the end of the session, so I can go through that?
Sure. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, so let's hear maybe 2 or 3. In the interest of time, we won't go through all of them. But Matthew, the thing that was coming up for you, or others, the sort of the topic of conversation that came up, whether it was the reason people were here or some of the terms that we're struggling with.
Layla is our rapporteur for our small group.
Yeah.
I'll hand over to her.
Okay. So we actually spent most of the time introducing ourselves, and then at like the last minute where I rambled on about why I'm here. But just to sum up from like the bits of introductions, I definitely say that most people are here to find out what M&E really means in the civic tech space and how it's conducted. And then I guess a lot of us don't have dedicated individuals in our organization that can dedicate like time into finding the best or making the best decisions about how to integrate it. And I think that's what we most value from.
Excellent. Do we have somebody from one of the other groups? Yeah, I see a hand.
Yeah, I can speak for my group. Hi, my name is Frei Sahi from Code for Puerto Rico. So what we discussed primarily was we have huge questions of what initial steps and what are the expectations of creating a M&E group within a brigade, specifically Code for Nepal and Code for Puerto Rico, since we're just really starting out to organize ourselves that way. And also, how can external institutions to like the Code for All, Code for America, Code for like X organizations can partner up with us to help us through digital transformation, and just trying to understand what digital transformation and M&E means for us.
Do we have anyone else with burning?
I can share, Merlin.
Sure.
Yeah, we had a really interesting group, a lot of Canadians, but some folks working at Code for organizations, other nonprofits, and also inside of government, which is really cool. And some topics of conversation included kind of, how do you measure digital transformation in a community or in a government or in a different setting, as well as something that I brought up that I know I always somewhat still struggle to wrap my head around when Merlin and John talk about it, is sort of the difference between a logic model and a theory of change. You asked us about terms, and those came up.
I love that. How about one more?
I think it was our group was the other one. And I was responsible for taking notes, so I feel it probably falls to me. But yeah, so we talked about just different terms and how things can be easily quite confusing, but we really actually, most of the time was spent talking about just how excited people were that this is now a thing, and that we're, dedicating a lot of time and like focus and people to this. So basically it's a lot of pressure.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
That's okay. My name is Nina. I'm from Hive Digital, and I'm actually representing a digital marketing agency here. And one thing that I'm finding in listening here is everybody, or most people, seem to all represent the brands within themselves that are making this transformation, making this change, to evaluate it for themselves. For me, I came here more so to try to understand what types of things happen in those conversations, such that when we're presented with that from one of our clients or our prospective clients, how we can best help them in promoting their new initiatives or in promoting whatever redirections they're taking, as a marketing partner for them. So I guess as I'm listening here, and I guess if you guys don't mind, as you're kind of moving forward with this conversation, if you have a chance or any time to kind of highlight, hey, this would make a really good ally or a partner for us in this moment, I would really like to hear, whatever thoughts or something as you're going through these slides as to how someone could work alongside you or help engage in those conversations from that aspect, if it comes up at all. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the ways that Code for Canada, especially, and I think Code for All in general, we're often what I call an intermediary. So the change that we are monitoring for is not necessarily within our own organization, which I think you'll agree is actually more difficult, because you have to first get people to agree on where they are and the type of change they need, and then you don't have complete control over how those changes are made. So the model that we use, I think, is very conducive to external parties supporting other organizations. So I think you'll find that, and as we get to the end into the questions section, if you haven't really felt how it could apply, let's revisit it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Merlin.
Merlin, so Nassim from Code for Pakistan has a question. Do you mind if he asks it, or?
I never mind.
Perfect. So Nassim?
Thank you, Sofía. Thank you. Merlin, I have just one question. My information about M&E is very basic. Therefore, I couldn't ask some very hard question. I will just like to get one information from you that how we should persuade government officials or government departments to share this baseline data or required data which we could evaluate later on to check the impact of our projects. What kind of diplomatic strategies or what kind of methods we can use to actually get baseline data, or even the data which our softwares or our projects produce to from government. I hope I could explain myself clearly or not. Did you get my point?
Absolutely. You explained yourself 100% clearly, and I will say that there isn't a really good answer for you. So what we'll do is, we'll talk about how we're engaging with government, how we begin with those baseline surveys and doing a contextual analysis. But really, the thing that we emphasize is that all of this is context specific. And so your ability to work with government really is dependent on the relationship that you have with government and their openness to being evaluated. So let's move forward. And Luke, I'm not ignoring your question about theory of change or logic models. It's just a part of our presentation, so we'll talk about it when that comes.
Even if we don't get to it, Merlin, we got time.
Yeah. So learning objectives, essentially we're just restating the agenda here, but we really want to, excuse me, understand the challenges related to monitoring and evaluation. This is related to some research that we've done, introduce Code for Canada's approach and how it's applied, introduce the components of contribution analysis, and then we're hoping to get some practice applying some of the early contribution analysis components to a project that we'll introduce later. So the problem as we see it, or as we state it, and you'll hear throughout that we believe that beginning with the problem and having our solutions being problem-driven is a part of our approach for Code for Canada. And so the problem, as we stated, is digital approaches have not been evaluated in a robust and comprehensive way. And we talk about robust, and I use sort of two parts of the Merriam-Webster definition. Robust is strongly formed or constructed. And then the second part, often used in relation to software, is capable of performing without failure under a wide range of conditions. And then comprehensive, covering broadly or completely, and having or exhibiting wide mental grasp. So when I say this, it's not that there aren't good things happening in monitoring and evaluation, but the approaches are often context specific, dependent, are telling the stories that we want to hear, or not allowing access to data that we need to improve. So we're doing it, or I mean, most often it's a checkbox exercise to make a funder or a partner happy. And so as a result, there's limited information about what works, why, and for whom. And the why for us is the big important piece, the why it's working in the context. And I think that's where we get our most tangible learning, and how to apply different, or have programs and approaches that translate across context. So again, as I mentioned, this all comes from research on a paper that will be coming out later this year, looking at why is it not being done well. And I think the first one has to be always that resources and capacity. I think, as I said, we feel very privileged to be able to focus on this full time and know that most people don't have that luxury. and so there often it falls to people who are project managers or government policy analysts who are asked to do this and don't really have the expertise or the background in this. So I think we can look at that and say that's like by far the number one challenge, and it's just a struggle with resources and that balance between getting your work done and doing monitoring and evaluation. People will always default to getting the work done, as they should. Emerging outcomes. And so when you're working with complex challenges and in complex situations, sometimes you can get to a very clear identification of the problem without being able to get to a clear identification of the solution. And so often the change that we need to see or want to see, the capacity that we want to see built, isn't evident from the beginning. And so we need, when we're looking at monitoring and evaluation, to be able to allow for emergent change and allow for muddling through and figuring out what we're trying to accomplish as we go. And a lot of the existing monitoring and evaluation approaches, especially thinking about your randomized controlled trials or your pseudo-experimental approaches, don't allow for this. They don't allow for change as you go through and as you're applying and reacting to the learning. The next one, the time lag for impact. A lot of times the change that we're working on is 1 or 2 steps removed from the beneficiaries. So in Code for Canada, we work a lot with government partners, and those government partners often work with other staff who then work with residents. And so for the changes that we are making within our government partner to actually benefit the lives of the residents, there's a big time lag there. And so that makes it difficult and means that you have to be tracking things long after your program has finished its intervention. And so when we look at government funded programs or philanthropic programs, there's often not that budget allocated for a longer term assessment of impact on beneficiaries. The next one, numerous activities within an intervention. So often we have different components to an intervention, and the intersection of those activities is what is making the change. And so it makes it challenging to say, to attribute change to this activity or this activity when you have multiple and intersecting activities. So often Code for Canada works with a product-led capacity building change. And so the capacity building that's going on with the government partners or with the community partners intersects with the increase or the improvements in their digital products. And so we have to allow that both of those things are making the change, not necessarily one or the other. The next one, numerous stakeholders within a change. So again, using one of our programs, government digital groups. So we have the Canadian Digital Service, or we have the Ontario Digital Service within the province of Ontario. And they're working also to transform digital spaces within government and help improve the digital capacity. And so we are working alongside them and want to be complementary. And so monitoring and evaluating our own impact has to take into account the work that they're doing. External factors. This one is your the things that you don't control in your environment, in your context. So one of the things that has really thrown people in Canada recently has been elections. When you have a government party who is all for one thing and then they're replaced, first of all, everything stops, and then when it does come back, they they have to, like their priorities have to sound like them and not sound like the previous government, even if it's the same thing. I think probably even more applicable globally is a small thing like COVID, which disrupts us and makes the way that we figure out the capacity that we've built or change look very differently. Multiple beneficiaries. This is similar to what we talked about above, where our direct beneficiaries for the program would be potentially community associations or different clients that we're working with. But the impact for residents is in their work. And so we have to be able to try and trace the line of impact through our beneficiaries into the ultimate end user, which is challenging. Selection bias. Well, and this one we talk about again in relation to more pseudo-experimental and why that's not an appropriate approach in this field, and that most of the people, whether they're government partners or community associations or clients, private clients, they come to us, and so that's demonstrating that they have some interest in building their capacity, they have some interest in making some change, which inherently introduces a selection bias. Absence of trust. We're looking at between residents and government, or even civil society and residents. There's pockets of mistrust or just the efforts haven't yet been made to develop a necessary relationship to have residents be perfectly open and willing to share the information or the impact that the intervention is having on them. And finally, limited access to beneficiary data. And this is a self-imposed challenge in that a lot of demographic information we need to be very careful about when we're using, and make sure that we are recognizing biases and the inherent or potential danger to others as we're collecting their data. So that was a whole lot of information, and I'm going to stop and allow for some thoughts, questions, feedback.
You can also put them in the chat and I can read them through.
Yes. For those of you like me who don't like speaking on Zoom, you can put them in chat.
Can we jump in and ask a question?
Absolutely.
I was thinking that some of the challenges that we talked about is common for any M&E work that we're doing, whether in civic tech or not. And I was wondering, what are some challenges that is unique to M&E in civic tech ecosystems? Is that clear?
Yeah, for sure. I think the most unique challenge that we find is that we are often evaluating for the impact of a digital product or a digital process change that has to coincide with a capacity building change. And so where a lot of monitoring and evaluation for interventions are around capacity building or knowledge, access to whatever services are necessary. The intersection of digital products or processes and the necessary capacity building to go with that makes it unique. I would say that's the number one thing that I've come across. And then I think the civic tech being so, like, not to try and avoid using the lingo, but civic tech being like small a agile, and so a lot of iterative, a lot of early failures, which are necessary in order to figure things out. So there's no real prescribed journey that people can follow in a lot of these situations. There needs to be that authorization for failing. And so how do you incorporate some early slippage, and as some of the literature talks about the muddling through. So there's not a clear path, there's just sort of kicking through, trying to figure out where to go. And having that's actually success. So learning about what's not going to work is the success, and integrating that into the model, I think, is another unique challenge.
Ferland, you have a question?
Yeah. Those last 3 points, I think my question touches maybe around all three. When working with government partners, is there a way, or have you found it like the secret recipe of noticing selection bias when you don't have the trust of who you're working with and there's limited data? My experience is that sometimes while working with government partners, they're overly cautious and don't trust you, or they themselves don't have the data, and whatever they give you is maybe to benefit a narrative. Have you found a way to work around that?
I mean, governments are still governments, and I think, in saying that, like, civil society is still civil society, and people are always going to want to make sure that their funding doesn't dry up. And so the unfortunate reality is that often monitoring and evaluation is somehow tied to the funding. One of the things that we suggest that this model allows for is to be more ambitious, for governments to be more ambitious in their setting of goals, because the model suggests that we can only monitor a portion of it, and that the rest of it has to be plausible based on existing evidence. And so where governments are afraid often to set lofty goals because they won't be able to prove that they've achieved them, we can say we can prove that we contributed along the results chain in a way that is plausible to achieving these long-term benefits, even if we can't prove them right now. And I think from like a civil society or NGO perspective, there just has to be both. There has to be the monitoring for the narrative that is necessary, and making sure that it is evidence-based instead of anecdotal, but that the learnings for improvement are also collected alongside, even if they don't necessarily make it into a report of learnings and failing, that they are being used ongoing and integrated into the way the programs are developing or shifting, pivoting.
Cool, thanks.
Can I jump in, or?
Absolutely, yep.
Hi everyone, good day again. I have a couple questions for you, Merlin, but I suppose also open to the broader group of participants here. And maybe they're on two sides of the intervention spectrum. So the first one, I think, is I guess, like, tactics or strategies that you guys are using. And I think this maybe builds on a bit of what you just mentioned a while ago, which is certainly in my context and some of my experiences, that there's often limited or little interest in monitoring or engaging with impact by government as compared with outputs, right? right? It's like, and part of that is kind of like the incentive framework for government institutions, where that inputs are like, that's where like so much of the political return on investment is. So we get to announce, you know, $1 million project to address, you know, water access in this community, or we get to announce that we have created this app or the bridge is built, but the actual effectiveness of that intervention is not, and kind of the monitoring of that doesn't necessarily align with kind of political actor interest, because it's a long-term thing. It also suggests a requirement to think about whether what we've done is actually the right thing, or if it's effective in achieving kind of the outcomes, right? And then that gets even worse with technology, where the technology pixie dust is like, here is the app that we've built to solve, you know, food security in the entire world, right? Like, who cares if it actually is achieving the outcome? So I think that's maybe one question to kind of get some reactions on. And I think that the second one, I think which is more an internal conversation, is for organizations, you know, and Code for, I guess we'll be talking, Code for Canada, you'll be talking about your approach is, where do you draw your box of concerns around what success looks like, right? Because, you know, I was talking to, and I probably won't have too much of an issue, I was having a call with one of our regular calls with Adi from Open Up, Leila's on this, and we were talking about a project that they're looking at around access to water as one of their Code for All proposals. And, you know, we were talking about this idea of like, what is success? Like, is success, and because we've done some work on access to energy in Jamaica, and, you know, like, is success within the context of this project the process output, which is we've done this research, we've created this intervention, maybe there's a data portal, maybe there's an intervention that's there, or do we include the effectiveness of that intervention in these further downstream type things? Like, does this, you know, is there some, what we've done, does that actually have kind of some contributing factors towards changes in access to water or electricity, and all of kind of the, you know, as you said, kind of like the intervention or outputs or kind of changes that might be along that kind of spectrum or service delivery value chain to get there. So I guess it's both kind of, you know, maybe a question for us is like, what is in that circle of things that we consider with success, but then also how do we engage with institutional actors who themselves are really only interested in those outputs as opposed to kind of further downstream things. Thank you. Over.
Yeah, I think if you don't mind, let's hold on to those questions, because I think for sure the one for how Code for Canada sort of puts the box on what it's interested in monitoring will be answered. And I think that maybe provides us with a better foundation to have a discussion. And the the one around how to get governments to be interested in versus impacts, I think is an age-old question. But I do think that sorry, am I freezing here? Are we back?
You were for a bit, but I think you're back now.
Okay. I think the one around governments, I think is something that we do try and address through our model. And so again, I think that once we've gone through that, there can be probably a deeper, more meaningful conversation near the end. Sound good? So I'm gonna go through this slide pretty quickly to try and to catch up on some of the time. So current responses, and these are ones that as Luke likes to remind me when I when I feel bad about pointing out other people's and how they've responded. Code for Canada has also done. But the quantitative counts of qualitative features, so looking at the pages of research notes, just really items that you can put percentages to, but that you're missing the contextual factors, and so it's really not telling us a whole lot. Like if you're talking about an increase of 50% in Twitter users, and you started with 1, as opposed to if you started with like 80 or 1,000 or 5,000, like that information doesn't help a whole lot unless there's a lot more context being given. And then I think the one that we see a lot in Code for All, and understandably so because it's narrative based, but the case studies and focused on series of events. So what happened and what sometimes there's some lessons learned. Typically a fairly limited perspective, anecdotal, and really capture a moment in time. And so lose the ability to show how the learning can be translated across different contexts. And then oversimplified logic models, where we're mapping out, we're going to do this input, and then it's going to lead us to this change, and then that change is going to have this impact, and then we solve world peace. And so there really is a desire to try and do things in a more structured way, which logic models provide that structure, but they can be a crutch that is really not all that helpful. So let's move on quickly into Code for Canada's approach. The thing that we're really starting to focus on now is building capacity in evaluative thinking. And evaluative thinking is really just a fancy way of saying that we want people to be thinking about capturing learning in their job. So we want it to be embedded in the way they do work. And so monitoring and evaluation becomes less of an add-on and more of a integration into the way that they approach their program delivery or their advocacy. Monitor and evaluate what we can, and this is a recognition that we don't have the resources to monitor and evaluate everything, and so we need to focus. We need to acknowledge our limitations, and so the things that we don't have access to through partners, or the things that we just can't focus on because we don't have the resources, we need to acknowledge them and be transparent about them. We want to leverage existing processes and data. We'll talk about this a little bit later. So we want to alter existing administrative processes or existing report writing, and have them be more conducive or more applicable and relevant to monitoring and evaluation rather than layering on new processes. Be transparent about our approach, which allows us to invite others to challenge our perspective. And this is sort of within our partners, but also globally in contexts like this. So the approach that we've adopted or are adapting to the work that we do is one that's called contribution analysis. And it's a 6-step approach to monitoring and evaluation. It's a theory-based evaluation, so meaning that it uses the theory of change. And so just really quickly, I want to go over these, but then we'll apply it and see, and then we can ask questions once we've seen what it looks like in practice. But the first part, and you've heard me say this before, and I repeat it consistently, that identifying the problem, so creating a problem statement and a problem to work from, so that it is problem driven. and then understanding the context in which we are working and the problem situated. And those initial steps are really foundational for the work that we do, and really foundational for later learning and confidence in data. And then develop a theory of change, and we have a visual for what a theory of change is in the next couple slides. But we develop a theory of change, which is essentially our hypothesis of the stages that change will take and the necessary conditions. And this, our theory of change is always collaborative. So whatever your stakeholders within the intervention are, should be involved in validating the theory of change, and validating the conditions for which it's going to be applied in. Develop and implement a data collection plan, and then data assembly and analysis. And so this is the looking for gaps in how you are going to tell your story around whether your theory of change held true or not, or when you made changes to the theory of change based on learning. And then looking at where your gaps are to do some final data collection. And then iterating on your theory of change and publicizing your learnings. So it's not unlike a lot of your standard sort of approaches to monitoring and evaluation, but there are some key differences that we'll discuss. So this is how we apply it internally. We have a fellowship program, which is a product-led capacity building program within governments at all levels. And we embed 3 digital design fellows within government, and they work on building capacity and making strides towards creating a digital product that meets an identified need. Civic Toronto is the membership-based outside of COVID. It's like a co-working situation and collaborative situation where members have access to workshops and events and capacity building and support on specific projects. And Grit Toronto is a user testing, and essentially the idea for Grit Toronto is that digital products that are being built are being tested on a representative sample of the users that will be using it later. So too often our digital products are created with a very limited sample of users that don't represent actual community, and so Grit provides an opportunity to do that properly. And then externally, we've been working with the Canadian Digital Service, looking at supporting different modes of initial contextual analysis and how you decide on who you're working with, who you're partnering with, and working with them as they develop some of their contribution analysis theory of change work. Ontario Digital Service, looking at how to effectively evaluate the difference between product-led capacity building and just straight up capacity building, or just straight up product development. So 3 different approaches that are, I think, pretty common within digital transformation within government, and seeing, not necessarily trying to say one has more value than the other, but to figure out how we can effectively compare through monitoring and evaluation. And then, yeah, from the line that I always use, but monitoring and evaluation is both proving and improving. And I think a contribution analysis approach to proving is proving that you've contributed, which is different than attribution. So the approach that we use is not to try and prove that we did it, but we want to prove that it happened and that we contributed. And that's, I think, one of the fundamental differences of the contribution analysis approach, and is integral to being able to work with partners, because you know, working with governments or working with NGOs, they don't want to hear the external organization say, we proved that we did this. We took this government or this city service and we made it better. That's not it's not appropriate within the context that we're working, but we also do need to be able to prove that we added value, and that's what we work for. And then improve is the function of monitoring, and looking at how we can improve our approach as we go on. Let me just take a breath there and see if there are any questions.
Remember,
And
you
if not,
can. Sorry, go, Merlin.
no, I was saying if not, I can move on. But yes, feel free to put the questions in the chat too. So, as I said, we're adapting this from like in-person to online, and so want to give people an opportunity to sort of stop listening to my voice and start to think about how to apply this. And so to make it a little bit more practical and briefly introduce you to one of the projects, I'm going to look through or introduce you to what's called the MOVE project. And it is a City of Toronto Vision 02.0 initiative. And it's an attempt to change the way transportation safety related projects are initiated, from being very reactive requests from councillors or citizens who have the ability to make the noise, to get traffic lights, crosswalks, that type of thing. And the desire is to shift it into more data-driven decision making. Current data management systems are making it difficult for staff to engage. There are some bottlenecks with their legacy systems that are just not solvable. So they're building a modular solution in the attempts to eliminate those bottlenecks and then be able to identify future or downstream other process bottlenecks. So they have brought in a team that of a product manager, a developer, and a UX researcher to try and both develop the project or the digital platform, but also to build the capacity of the department in their ability to either develop digital products or at least be smarter shoppers in how products are developed and how they're monitoring that. And making sure that they're being developed in a modular way so that they don't run into this big issue of the legacy systems again. And so if we look at step one for the contribution analysis approach, developing the problem statement and then the contextual analysis. So on the left, you'll see it's a template for developing a problem statement. It comes from the Ontario Digital Service. And then on the right, you'll see the example of that we use for the transportation services or for the MOVE project. So we have observed that transportation services data management systems are not meeting the needs of city staff, resulting in an inability to reach stakeholders, share key insights, and significant labor on the part of city staff. How might we improve so that city staff can access traffic data and proactively make transportation safety recommendations, reduce response time, and increase public trust? So again, the purpose of this is to keep the focus of the initiative when you have so many moving parts, to be able to start with the actual or an agreed upon problem. Make sure that you are focusing on developing the solutions to that problem and not having a lot of scope creep. So then I want you to hold that problem statement in mind, and then look at the next step, still part of step one, but is to develop the contextual analysis. We were going to do this as a breakout activity, but I think we'll just sort of talk about it here quickly. So the problem is the first half, the contextual analysis, or the context within which it is occurring, is the second part. And so we look at the economic, community, historical, cultural, political, relational, sociocultural factors. And so I want to give people an opportunity here to just talk about like things that you would recognize from the MOVE project that you would think would be important pieces of information to know in order to situate the initiative within the context, and provide adequate information for those people who are working on the initiative to understand the environment within which they're within which they'd be working. So the first one would be indicate the types or categories of information that they would need to know, and then identify and address unique characteristics and features that have the potential to facilitate or limit solving the stated problem. So again, feel free to unmute and offer or put it into chat. And perhaps if it's easier too, think about, since we don't obviously know a lot about the context within which the MOVE project is happening, if you think about the unique characteristics of the environments within which you're working, and we can sort of phrase that as, is this possibly a limitation or a facilitator within the City of Toronto situation? I don't know if that's a good sign because people are engaged, or a bad sign because they're not, but we will move on. The idea here for contextual analysis is that we, within our context, we have some assumptions, and we have some beliefs, and it's really important that at the very beginning we are stating those, and making them clear that that in order for the change to occur that we want to see, that our assumptions are going to hold true. And so this leads us into this. Did I skip one? Yeah. So this leads into looking at developing the theory of change. And so if you look at the colored boxes in the middle, this is our results pathway. So you look at outputs and activities, reach and reaction, and then capacity change, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, leading to behavior change, immediate benefits, long-term change. Again, these are developed as you are planning your program, ideally, and they are hypotheses about how change occurs. Now, the thing that takes it from a logic model or a results pathway into a theory of change are the little things, the words on the right, which we see better in the next slide. but they're your assumptions or your necessary conditions. So what we're saying is that in order for the capacity change to turn into behavior change, these assumptions need to hold true. These necessary conditions need to exist. And it's going to be easiest if we talk about them in the next slide when we actually use some real examples. But then if you take theory of change, your data analysis and your contextual analysis, that tells your performance story. So that is your end result. Often in our situations, it's a formative story. It's a formative evaluation rather than summative because the change continues to occur. So this is a theory of change, one part of the theory of change for the fellowship program at Code for Canada. And I use it as an example because we spent a lot of time validating it with the partners. But you'll see that we went from outputs to capacity changes so that we skipped reach and reaction because our reach is predefined. And it is the government partners that we're signing contracts with. And so the model is adaptable to your specific situations. But if you look at the capacity change, often people talk about culture change and then how culture change is really difficult or impossible to measure, which I would mostly agree with. The way that we are trying to address it is through looking at capacity and behavior and how capacity leads to behavior, which in our perspective is the essence of culture. So if you look at capacity change, incorporates three components. One is capability, and capability is your basic, your skills, your knowledge, your processes, and then opportunity is your permissions, your authorizing environment, your ability to fail, the right tools. And then motivation is your sort of your psychological incentives and the reason why you would try and do something that's more difficult, something that is pushing you towards. So capability is hard skill, opportunity is more your environment, and motivation is your internal incentives. And then the interaction between the three of those leads to behavior, and the behavior change reinforces your capacity changes. And then on the right-hand side, these are your assumptions or your necessary conditions. So we say in order for capacity changes to impact and make behavior change, the new capabilities need to be easy to apply. So if you are teaching staff skills that are far outside of their skill set and they're not able to apply them, we believe that you'll have a difficult time changing behavior. One of our assumptions is that Code for Canada provides regular support and is able to address technical challenges in a timely fashion. And then sustained government partner leadership, support and resources for adoption of digital and user-centered approaches. And so oftentimes we get permission to have initiatives or to do a project, but the support to do difficult long-term change just isn't there. And so in order for it to change actual behavior, that long-term support needs to be there. So then behavior into immediate benefits into long-term change. So we're gonna not do this as an activity because I think we're running out of time. But to answer one of the questions posed earlier, Code for Canada really primarily focuses our monitoring and evaluation on this COM-B. So COM is the capacity change, which is capability, opportunity, and motivation. and then the behavior change. And that's because those are the things that we can most impact, we can most contribute to change within. And then it's plausible that after monitoring for a change in behavior, that behavior leads to some early benefits and some early changes, and then leads to long-term change. And so I'm not saying that Code for Canada doesn't do the long-term change, but within the program delivery time, we focus specifically on the capacity change, the three components of the capacity change, and the behavior change. And take another breath there and see if people have questions.
Actually, I have one quick question. Well, I don't know if it's a quick question, actually. So I went to, a few months back, I went to a training that included contribution analysis kind of in the training, and the, I was talking about capacity building, and that was really what kind of my focus was, and being able to kind of measure that change and measure that capacity, if the capacity was built, if you will. And that person actually, they suggested that contribution analysis wasn't actually a good fit for capacity building. And I'm wondering if you either have a response to that, or maybe have an insight into why they would say that, if that makes sense. Because I think you are challenging that here. And saying, actually, it is possible, and it works.
Yeah, I absolutely would say that I'm challenging that. I think so contribution analysis is an approach to monitoring and evaluation that is theory-based. So meaning it's based on a theory of change. And so the inclusion of a capacity theory of change, or a capacity focused theory of change, addresses some of the early concerns. And so I think people who had early introduction to contribution analysis, where there was a standard theory of change that didn't have an explicit focus on capacity building, I think people sort of hold on to that and remember it. But I think for the last 8 or 9 years, the evolution of contribution analysis has been with this COM-B theory of change, which explicitly is designed to be able to address capacity change.
Thank you. That's actually really helpful. And then I don't know if someone else has something else, but I actually just kind of, before we get close to the end, I was wondering if you had any, and it might be in your slides, but if there's any like resources that we can look to for like further, I guess, understanding of this. Obviously, other than not the report, but the article you're going to be writing, or that you're in the middle of writing. But if there's anything that we can go to resource-wise, that would be helpful for us, kind of in the same vein.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I don't have it in here. We usually provide a handout, which I guess I did not digitize. But Sofía and I can connect, and I can send her links. And yes, I would probably be accurately accused of being biased, but I think that the paper that we wrote that is being published is really a really good summary of this approach and how it applies to civic tech. But yeah, unfortunately, it's still in publication process and won't be ready until probably, they've guaranteed before the end of the year, but we'll get you something before then for sure.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep. I see another hand.
Matthew, go.
Okay, so I'm trying to think about how to. There are a couple different things I'm contending with Merlin as your presentation, which I thought was great, by the way. Thank you for this. I think it was very. It's kind of gotten the cogs turning. So I thought your move project was an interesting one because the move example was an interesting one because the problem, and I like the problem definition template that you have there, but the problem definition in some way is different or disconnected, so to speak, from a particular service delivery problem, which may have multiple contributing factors to it, right? And I thought that was, and for the purposes of this, I think from a complexity perspective, that's probably like a useful way for us to kind of engage with the methodology without necessarily engaging with the complexity of, you know, if someone comes to you and say, like, all right, we want to work on, you know, use the example before, access to water, access to energy, which in either case, assuming that even within the context of that broader frame, you're likely going to be saying to that government partner, all right, well, let's focus on a specific problem within that broader challenge, right? So I'm assuming that you're typically going to be doing that anyway. So there's often a focus on some, it's kind of, I mean, we kind of share a problem-driven approach to these things. I suppose I'm still, you know, I'm still struggling with that, the tension or the discipline necessary to focus on the institutional strengthening, which is kind of what the COMBI model does, in a context where the service delivery gaps remain like quite stark, right? Like, so, I mean, maybe this is probably not a bigger issue for like Canada, but I'm sure like, you spend quite a bit of time in Ghana, and, you know, probably for many of the actors here, you know, reconciling with like a focus on strengthening institutions, building more effective government, and maybe focusing on those institutional capabilities and adoption of those things, better tools, processes, etc., and not really engaging with, well, are those things manifesting in better services to people? And like, are those services that we're creating, which may be better for lots of user experience, kind of user product-oriented ways, resulting in better outcomes for people, which are ultimately kind of like one step removed. And so it's not really a critique, so to speak. It's just kind of like, it's just a tension that I continue to grapple with in my own, in our own work as well. Over.
So you just made the nerd in me really happy, because I too love grappling with that. And I would say that it probably, like, I'd love to have a longer ongoing conversation about this. My quick reply, and that invitation is extended to everybody on this call. But my quick reply is our problem statement is perspective focused. And so if you are working with, like within the institution in a way, or from a department or a unit that has service delivery as their perspective, then that would make sense to include it. I think my approach to interventions and to monitoring and evaluation is really based in what you've probably heard of as a problem-driven iterative adaptation approach. And so what it says, its critique is that people are often too focused on turning the water on right away. You turn the water on, you drill the borehole, you fix the presenting problem without talking to people, and then 6 months later, it's it's gone. The borehole is spoiled, it's finished, it doesn't work. The water, whatever, people don't know how to maintain it. And so there's always that tension between having those visible results and also having the initial capacities being built, even if they aren't immediately resulting in visible change. And I don't think there is a you do it this way or you do it this way. And I think this is what you're saying, is that it's sort of an ongoing tension. How do you decide to not give people water, knowing that they wouldn't have water in 6 months because you want to focus on the systems to maintain those water delivery systems? It's an ongoing ethical problem, and I think evaluation reflects that, right? Like, my perspective for monitoring and evaluation is that it is intimately intertwined with program development and program delivery. If it's not, you're wasting your time. And so the ethical challenges that you have with program delivery, you find the same challenges with monitoring and evaluation. I think we're probably over time, but if I can just maybe 2 more minutes. I just wanted to go quickly over. Okay, I just wanted to go quickly over, and if people have to leave, I won't be offended. But like, when you look at data collection in a contribution analysis approach, it's really a mixed method approach. And that includes the quantitative analysis and quantitative metrics, but deprioritizes them until people become more familiar with how to properly collect qualitative data. And so when we talk about qualitative data from an ethnography perspective, we look at 3 different ways. One is artifacts. So these are the productions. And this relates to what I was talking about before, and how we attempt to have people alter the administrative documents that they already use, or administrative processes and the results from that, in a way that collects necessary data, instead of trying to layer on another data collection tool. So for example, with the Civic Hall Toronto, we do an initial analysis of the capacity of the future member. That's a part of the administrative process in order for us to know how to provide service to them. That also is our contextual analysis. But we're not doing a contextual analysis and a new member getting to know you. We've created one system or one process that meets both of those purposes. Also, like, some government already have performance metrics. They can be incorporated into the contribution analysis approach. One of the things I'll show later is that for product development, we use roadmaps. Those roadmaps are data, and we use them as such. So they're happening anyways in a product development process, but we can now use them for monitoring and evaluation data. Surveys and interviews, people are familiar with those, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But making sure that they are semi-structured, so that they can be data. And so often people call like conversations key informant interviews, but I think that there needs to be some steps taken to formalize those conversations in order to make the topics of conversation actual data. And the way we do that is by using observations. And so if we hear interesting things within conversations, we ask staff or government partners to formalize it in an observation template. So whoever was there at the meeting, and I'll show you some, but whoever was there can document the situation, those who were present, and the observation that relates to the theory of change. So we have a formalized record of it. Metrics we talked about. And then data confidence is sort of the next level that we're pursuing, and it's how to demonstrate or increase the confidence that you have that the data you've collected is telling the story that you're trying to tell. And so this is a process within data analysis, and it's sort of an add-on to contribution contribution assessment, contribution analysis, and it's called process tracing. And it's a different level. So I just wanted to introduce it because a lot of times people talk about the reliability of qualitative analysis, and so the two ways that we try and combat that are using mixed methods and also then demonstrate going through a process to increase data confidence. So yeah, product roadmap, artifact. We talk about how each step was accomplished, and if it wasn't accomplished, what of the necessary conditions weren't present to cause it to be not able to be accomplished. This is the template we use, and I'm happy to send all this information because I'm going to go through it really quickly, but for people who are interested in it. So this is the template we use. Someone was at a situation and the meeting that they had or the process they went through related to the theory of change. They're asked to document it here. This becomes a data point for us. Artifacts. So this is a retro meeting that we had with a client. They talked about some things that changed because of the way that we worked with them. It changed the way that they developed their screener for user testing. Emails that we're inviting other people into an agile product development process. These are all, this is all data that demonstrates that there are some capacities being built. Web analytics, we won't talk a lot about that. These are pretty self-explanatory. And then this is where I'll leave it. I'm happy to send this to people and have this conversation later around process tracing for data confidence. And I apologize for being late. Yeah, but I also open to questions.
Don't worry. We still have 10 more minutes for questions. So if anyone wants to shoot their ideas, questions, doubts, everything, now is the moment.
And yeah, that's the last thing I'll put is my email address. Feel free to reach out for some sort of preliminary conversations, and then yeah, looking forward to working with Sofía and developing some more in-depth, less overview and more practical applications of this.
And thank you so much for everyone for joining, and thank you so much Merlin and John for this session. It was super interesting and really insightful.
Thank you all for coming.